I think we've come in early. We was halfway through the intro. I think I accidentally clicked my mouse button. I do apologise for that. Well, welcome to Green Pass Gaming's Midweek Catch-up. I was plugging my phone in, and I think the cable I was using to plug it in automatically skipped us to the next scene on OBS. For those that use OBS, you probably know what I'm on about. Welcome to this week's show. Rather abrupt beginning, but here we are. I'm your host, Flap.
And off, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a little bit. As you can tell, I am blessed with the rest of the GPG crew. We are here in all of our glory. We had 3 topics set up for today, like we normally do. It's not often we haven't done a Thursday show for a little while, so it's always good to do a Thursday show. We seem to pull in a few more numbers. I think it just works better timing around the world with regards going live at this time rather than the Sunday mornings. But here we are. We had 3 topics all set up, and then the then the news changed all of a sudden, and we had to change our topics slightly. So we'll go into the topics in a second. But thank you for being here, chat. We've already got people in the chat. Always great to have people in the chat pushing us and pulling us and testing us and lobbing grenades basically at our feet and asking us questions and stuff. We love all of that. If you're watching after the live show, please stick any comments that you have in the section in the comment section below. We do our best to answer those. And as always, hit the like and subscribe button if you're new to the channel and you like what you hear. Oh, and one last thing, while I do my salesman's pitch, we have a Discord channel. The link to that is in the description below. So please, if you want to carry on the discussion, it's a pretty active Discord channel. If you want to carry on the discussion after the show, sign up to that. We will welcome you with open arms, and we can carry on the discussions from there. Right, that's the housekeeping done. So tonight's topics, well, yeah, tonight's one's changed, and we'll probably do it top of the shop, and that's probably, if you're not aware of it already, you're probably living in a cave, but Starfield and Redfall have officially been delayed till 2023, so we'll be diving into that. Series S, not necessarily just Series S, but obviously it's pitched with Series S, maybe be getting access to disc-based games. I think people thought it was a joke when we flashed it up on our Twitter feed, but no, it's a serious thing. A patent's gone in, and we'll be looking into that. And also, last weekend, Xbox Live suffered some server outages, which led to some DRM issues. And at the time, I was a little bit disgruntled, but it seemed to have blown up on the internet a little bit. So we'll be looking into the ramifications of that. But let's get back to the first topic of today's show. And perhaps we'll go straight to you, Pucks, if that's okay. Starfield,
Sure
Redfall,
thing.
delayed till next year. What was your initial impressions of that?
Very surprising news. It did the rounds very, very quickly through my Twitter feeds, and everybody was sharing it and commenting on it, saying that they couldn't believe it, but could believe it, that it was expected, but not expected. It was very much
Bad news travels
polarized.
fast.
Yeah, it was a very polarizing opinions of what people thought across the board. I'm not overly surprised because I think, as I said a number of times about Starfield before, I appreciate a lot of people are excited for it because it's a big Bethesda game. But yeah, I've not been hyped for it to any super degree, only because I haven't seen much of it outside of the screenshots. And I appreciate, again, people in the past have said things like how Bethesda have had a track record of not really showing things and announcing things until it was mostly complete and stuff like that, which is true. They have done that in the past, but it was almost, for me at least, it was to a degree where they're announcing that it's going to be coming out, was it November this year was the original dates, yet we still had not seen anything. And I like to think that for such a massive game, I personally would have expected something, like even more than just a teaser trailer, maybe a tiny bit of gameplay, just to wet the whistle until maybe doing a bigger reveal in the June period. But no, that wasn't to be, and I'm not really that surprised, if I'm perfectly honest. But I mean, I suppose the one that was a surprise was the fact they tacked on the Redfall announcement alongside with it in one big announcement. I think that was the other interesting part of it, just kind of bundling the two together. But again, I'm not super enamored personally with Redfall anyway. It hasn't necessarily, it looks good, it looks interesting, but it's not gripped me to the point I think I'm definitely going to get that off the shelf day one. I appreciate it. Is it coming to Game Pass?
Yeah, well, it's a first party title. Yeah, it's a first party title.
Yeah, of course it is. So I could have jumped into it, but I wasn't overly fussed anyway. But I appreciate a lot of people were. But I suppose the other thing, which I imagine we'll come to in a minute once the other guys have spoken, but it's definitely left a hole as to, well, what does the holiday period look like for Christmas now, at least for what we know about? Of course, we still have the Xbox / Bethesda showcase yet to come in June. We may well get a load of cool new, fresh announcements for things which may be released, hopefully released later this year. But outside of that, from what we know now and all the different IPs which are currently in development, which we do already know about, we already know that for the most part, none of those are coming out until at least early mid next year. So, where does that leave the holiday period? And I suppose it's got a lot of people also thinking, in a way, like, who's potentially going to sweep up the holiday period? The whole fanboyism is kicking in, and people, we've got this game coming out from from PlayStation, and I mean, even Nintendo get dragged into these things, but not that they necessarily count directly, if you get what I mean. But and I've definitely seen some conversation. I found it interesting reading some conversations around in our Discord, actually, toing and froing regarding is God of War and PlayStation now going to sweep the field of the holiday season, all the rest of it? And it's all led to a very interesting conversation. And again, delays are inevitable, right? But I don't know. I think it's almost led to a lot of developers maybe trying to be overconfident and trying to pitch into those particular windows, which are usually really common, or when you typically expect that big news. But in a way, because we're seeing so many different delays happen again and again and again, I think what we're really seeing is almost the real long-term ramifications of things like the pandemic and people working from home, getting used to that environment. We're now coming out of that. Companies aren't quite transitioning yet, and it's definitely affected a lot of schedules and things like that. So, yeah, it's a weird one. It's a shame, but not unexpected, I guess, is the summary of what I've said so far.
Yeah, I guess so. Luke, perhaps we'll come to yourself next. I mean, can we ever be surprised with any delays anymore? I mean, delays seem to happen all the time. Was you massively surprised by this? I'm not convinced. I'm not sure I was massively surprised, if I'm honest. They were quite brave, weren't they? They were quite far out, and they pitched the date. And I think is it 11 years to the day or something after Skyrim was released? Is that why they picked that date? There was something special about the date, wasn't there?
May have been, yeah. I wasn't. I wouldn't. Well, it's kind of 50-50. I was a little surprised. I was actually more surprised at Redfall being delayed.
Right.
I don't know why. I think I just expected that was maybe a little closer than, obviously they'd said that was actually supposed to come out, I think, in the summer, right, which is right around the corner. Obviously we haven't heard anything, so a little bit surprised on that one. Starfield, I wasn't shocked by it. I think probably the more surprising thing is the latitude of date they've given for the actual release now, which is basically the first half of next year, which is a pretty big chunk of time, and it obviously suggests these games were further out than people were thinking, really, in terms of where they were at in the development. So not surprising, again, because in one sense, because pandemic has messed up a lot of game schedules. There's still the effects of that. Games are getting delayed all the time, but it is disappointing. Having said that, I'd rather them delay it and for the games to be amazing than to be a mess. So,
I mean, Bethesda games built on that engine are historically a bit clunky, aren't they? So, I mean, if any game is going to need some spit and polish afterwards, it's probably going to be a Bethesda engine game. So, yeah, exactly. So, not a little surprised, but not too surprised. But I do think it leaves the year in terms of first party for Xbox is pretty bad overall, pending any rabbits they're going to put out of the hat, which I can't envisage too many of. So it's a one of the worst years, unless they pull out a rabbit, that I can remember in the last few years, which on the one hand is a testament to how much better they've been doing, but also it's not great. I mean, like you say, that the arse has just fallen out of their schedule for this year. I think I've seen a couple of comments floating around, and I kind of semi-agree. I think the only shadow drop or sort of surprise release they might be able to pull this year is perhaps Forza Motorsport 8. But quite a niche market, isn't it?
Well, it's not. I don't think that people think of that as a blockbuster game.
No,
I think I'm sure it'd be a great game, no question about that at all, if it does drop this year. but it's not the kind of thing that gets people excited en masse.
No,
Starfield was that kind of game, really. So if they get Forza out, then great. They've at least got something. But I do think it's a bit slim pickings.
It is. Like you say, Xbox were kind of doing okay in terms of launch schedules for this year, but like we say, the arse has just fallen out of that by the looks of things. And I completely agree. If you wanted to give anyone some extra time or give them a few extra months in the oven to sort of polish that game, then anything from Bethesda is probably the game that needs that extra polish, I guess, just to even, some of the silly bugs that Skyrim and Fallout have people floated in and all kinds of weird and wonderful things. So it does make you wonder. Scott, I know Phil Spencer's tweeted out some information, so perhaps you can just quickly fill us in on that. But also, it was quite brave for them to set a release date quite as far out as they did. And unfortunately, it can't be an easy decision to have to go back on that date, because I think, as I think Ash has said in the chat, it was the 11th anniversary of Skyrim releasing, so there was some significance to that date as well.
Yeah, that's right. So it was 11/11/11. Skyrim 11/11/22 being Starfield. So it was obviously a special date, and you're right. They were brave. They had balls, didn't they, to announce that date when they did so far out. And I think even the reaction at the time was very much like, ooh, you guys might come back to regret that.
Well, especially with Xbox missing the Halo window as well, because again, that date had a very big significance and they missed that. So this is kind of the second one that's happened to, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I don't envy the marketing guy's job this Christmas. I don't think, because they don't have an awful lot to work with. I bet you that's thrown a lot of their existing plans into flux. And I think Phil's tone in his tweet is a little bit different to last time. So I think the last time he tweeted something similar was obviously the Halo delay. And the message is kind of the same, where he's saying, look, it's really hard to make these decisions, and we're going to try and get better. The message is fairly consistent. I just get kind of a more frustrated tone from his most recent tweet. I think this is a big kick in the bollocks for Phil. It's a big kick in the bollocks for Game Pass. If you think they probably had a massive marketing push that involved Game Pass on PC, cloud, that probably involved particularly Starfield and Redfall to a lesser extent, that's simply not going to exist this Christmas anymore, unfortunately. So just to read his tweet though, he does say these decisions are hard on teams making games and our fans. While I fully support giving teams time to release these great games when they are ready, we hear the feedback. Delivering quality and consistency is expected, and we will continue to work better to meet those expectations. Obviously, you could just say they're just words, but it's obvious that internally they're conscious of the fact of, we've spoken about loads of times, Flap, what's the meme? Xbox has no games. Wow. And there's still not, there's obviously still having challenges changing that. And with each delay or with each issue that they have with the first party release, it's just obviously a little bit more negativity towards their first party output that they'd probably prefer not to have, whether it be Halo. Halo's continuing to have some issues into season 2. Now they've got no other games. We don't know what's coming. And I think it just really puts so much emphasis on the summer showcase. They've got to come out swinging in June. They've absolutely got to come out swinging in June. I think if they've got something to show, even if it's out, they've got to show it. Fable, Perfect Dark, whatever it might be, I kind of feel that they've got to show it now, because they kind of need to get back on top of the message and turn it into a positive where they can.
Yeah, I completely. And this is a question for you, Scott, but all of us as well, and including the chat. So please let me know what you think. How long ago do you think this decision was actually made? And I mean, I'm guessing it wasn't actually made today. They probably sit down and have to work out the PR around all of this and what happens going forwards. But is this a decision that was made this week, do you think? Or is this something that was sort of being raised on the risk register, as it were, 2 months ago? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a bloody good question, Flap, because you've got to think, what are we now, 6 months out? where he pretty much was 6 months out yesterday to the original release. I mean, what sort of phase of the development would they be in now? Should they just be simply polishing it? Should they simply be bug fixing it at this stage? Obviously, I'm not a game developer, so I'm not too familiar. And if that's the case, they probably would have known weeks, at least, if not months ago, that it was looking less and less likely. And I guess it just gets to the point where you've got to make a decision. And obviously, they've got to control that message.
But the reason I ask that question is because I'm thinking, you know, are they kind of back at the drawing board with this June showcase? Because, you know, did they have because they were calling it the sort of the Xbox stroke Bethesda showcase, and I know Bethesda has many more offerings than just Starfield, but I can imagine that was going to be the star of the show, pun intended. But have they now got to fill that gap? Do you think they're actually going to show Starfield, or do you just think they're going to kind of like, you know, sort of, you know, mention it but not really showcase it? Because I don't think they can at this point, can they?
Oh, well, I think it would be a bit of a turnaround if they didn't. If you look at the marketing for the event flap, what's the picture? Yeah, it's the Starfield logo. They've got to show it, and they've got to show it big. Now, I don't think it necessarily changed any plans, and I imagine they were probably aware that they were going to make this announcement, and it was just about trying to get the time right when they made the announcement of the showcase. What they probably wanted to do is have the announcement of the showcase out ahead of it, but giving them enough time where people get excited for the showcase without having those two announcements too close together. But they did say in the tweet that they were looking forward to showing both. Let me just get the tweet up, actually. I think they said, "We can't wait to show you our first deep dive into the gameplay for both Redfall and Starfield soon." And by soon, I can only assume that they mean in the June showcase. So I still think both games will play a massive, massive part in it. And also, if they're releasing in the first half of next year, and hopefully as early as possible in that year, there's probably not going to be any other opportunity for them to show either of those games other than maybe the Game Awards. So this is still, I think, the best time to show it, and the best way to address any negativity. Because if they show Starfield and it looks amazing, I think that softens the blow a little bit. I think people then think, oh, Jesus Christ, this game looks fucking amazing. Okay, I'm happy to wait an extra 3 or 4 months because look how goddamn good it looks. Hopefully that is the reaction. Hopefully it's not a Halo situation. But we'll see. But I think, they knew ahead of the showcase announcement, and they both will still play a pretty big part. And I think Bethesda in general are going to play a massive, massive part in that showcase.
No, I completely agree. But, you know, and perhaps one for Luke, you know, I think, you know, there was good news stories around the supply of Xbox Series X's and S's and stuff. So I'm guessing that Xbox and Phil Spencer were kind of heavily betting into the holiday period and Starfield, because, you know, lots of people appear nonchalant around Starfield, but I think on some level it would also be a console seller on some level, particularly if it was getting great praise in the press and stuff like that. So this must be a bit of a blow to their holiday plans that they can't really fill with anything else, I'm guessing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Starfield's the type of game that would have driven pretty significant growth, I think, for Game Pass in that period. So the fact that it's not there now means that they've got to think of potentially something else. They might just ride it. I mean, it's not as if, you know, it's going to drop off a cliff or something subscriber-wise. People are going to continue to subscribe, and obviously they will have planned for other things to hit the service then, but they all kind of coalesced around Starfield. And Redfall would have attracted some people, but it's nowhere near as high as you know, name brand recognition already that Starfield has. So I mean, it's going to be frustrating for them, I think. You know, I mean, I think they'll show it at E3. As Scott said, I'd be a bit of a kick in the face if they didn't.
You called it E3
because oh yes, days gone.
It is E3. We'll still call it E3. Yeah.
Freudian slip there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, you know, it would be a big kick in the face. Redfall they might not show because that might still be a little early. Although they did say in the Bethesda press release, if you want to call it that, you know, that they're looking forward to deep diving into the gameplay of both of them soon. So perhaps they were all ready to show it. And I mean, I think the decision, I suspect it wasn't, a quick fire decision taken in the last few weeks. I think probably they were looking at it for a number of months, but kind of hoping that things would come together, because game development's it's a bit wishy-washy, and projects can come together often really quickly in a place where people are happy with where they are. Uncharted 4 was famously a game like that, where it really only came together properly in the last 8 to 10 months, which is quite unbelievable. So, but I think the difference here is that for a game like Starfield, is probably so vast. And it's a Bethesda game, as as we said, it's on the Creation Engine. And they're introducing concepts like flight that haven't been there before in their games. So I think they probably just went, you know what, let's just get it right and make it a really great game. And I think it's really frustrating for everybody, but ultimately, if it leads to a better game, who cares?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, Pucks, I know you like Oblivion, and I know you like your Fallouts and stuff. So, a few extra, I say a few extra months in the oven. I don't know how long it will be in the oven for. Didn't they say did you say first half of 2023?
All they said was early 2023 and nothing more. And I've seen some comments in the chat from BMG who says that they can see Starfield dropping around February time, and that they think it might be a perfect time for the game to drop.
I disagree. I disagree. I think if they're going to make this call, I think the game is significantly not working or broken or not finished for it to actually probably warrant another 6 months, if I'm honest. Perhaps I'm wrong, and I really hope I am wrong, but I don't think that we're going to see it till probably this time next year, if I'm honest.
I was going to say, could you even see it being as late as holiday next year? Because I'm thinking from a marketing perspective as well, right? Because this was meant to be the big holiday seller, like Halo, right?
Man,
if I was Phil Spencer, if I was Phil Spencer, and I have to do this in my day job, okay. If a project is delayed, then you take the hit and you take the bloody nose out of it and all of the fallout. But the next date that you give has to be almost guaranteed, if that makes sense. I don't think this is the sort of thing where they can just keep delaying it and delaying it and delaying it, unless there's something majorly wrong. And the PR around this will have to just pick up the slack on some level. I think if I was Phil Spencer, I'd be saying to Todd Howard, right, you give me an exact date that this game will be ready by, and we will market it and go with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Scott.
I was just going to say, just to maybe clarify what they actually specified in the tweet, is that they did say first half of 2023. So that essentially gives them up until June. And the point I was going to make is, if they weren't confident of that, and I mean, you could say, well, if they weren't confident of the original date, they shouldn't have mentioned it, but you'd think this far out, if they weren't confident of it, they just would have said 2023. They would have given themselves a larger window if it was going to be as late as fall. So you would like to think that, maybe as late as June, possibly, or maybe May, maybe Redfall's February or March. It's difficult. We'll probably gauge a little bit more come June, the showcase, because we'll get an idea of where those games are. Just slightly off topic, but we spoke recently about the Gotham Knights trailer, and some of the comments was, that looks a little bit rough. It gives you kind of an idea of if that game's coming in hot or not. So we might know a little bit more then. So so they've said first half 2023, so that essentially gives them the first 6 months. That's a good 7 month delay.
Can I add as well? Because I've also seen some articles of, apparently, this was technically dated about E3 time last year, but apparently I think it's Jason Schreier, is it, on Twitter? I know people seem to love and hate this guy. I don't know too much about him personally, but he apparently interviewed some devs prior to E3 last year before one of the video reveals, and apparently some devs had said to him in confidence, or whatever it was, in whatever the format, that they were really unsure if they could meet the internal deadlines and dates for delivery on Starfield. Yeah. To the point where apparently internally they was already saying that they do not want this game to be another Cyberpunk. And that was only, obviously, that point in time, that was only out 6 months. So that's a bit of a blow to think, Christ, if we're doing this, they really feared that. Again, we're talking almost a year out, so a lot changes in that time. But I do wonder if they were thinking that kind of thing back then surely that just goes to show the projection of how the project's going, how much work is left to do, and maybe the deadlines were just a bit too tight, even at that point. maybe they're crunching, got to this stage and gone, you know what, if you want a solid product, we can't do this. Like, you're not going to be able to meet it unless you're working like 24/7. You know, you just can't do that. It's not healthy for people, right? So,
well, I think one of the problems that you know with the Bethesda acquisition is that there is perhaps pressure on them now for their big games to help sell consoles, whereas obviously when they weren't owned by a platform holder, they could just launch a game as and when it was ready. They would obviously want to capitalize on the holiday sales of the game itself and stuff, but I think there may be an extra level of perhaps pressure on these studios to sort of, you know, not only are you going to release this game that will sell, but it will also help sell consoles as well. So it makes me wonder how much pressure Xbox might be putting on them to actually get these games out.
Can I maybe offer a bit of a counter to that, Flap? If you don't mind, then I'm conscious I do want to let Luke say what he was going to say before I interrupted him again. But just on that point, I actually think it's maybe the other way around, mate.
Okay.
I think these studios, independent studios, particularly Bethesda, and I tweeted earlier, I used Psychonauts as an example. These are studios that need to get these games out because they need to get the money in for cash flow purposes. So I think an independent Bethesda probably would have had more pressure on them to release it this fall than the current Bethesda under Microsoft's ownership, because as we saw with Psychonauts, the involvement of Microsoft in these studios has given them more funding and more time to allow them to, at least in Psychonauts' case, create what I think was probably a much better game than what was originally going to be released.
But Psychonauts was never going to be a console seller, unlike
no, it's and I'm not saying for one moment that it is, but I guess the point still stands is that now that they're owned by Microsoft, yes, the pressure will still exist to sell consoles or subscriptions or whatever the KPIs that they have, but they probably now have a little bit more flexibility or leeway where they can make this decision to delay the game, where maybe if they weren't and they didn't have the cash flow, it would have been more important for them to capitalize on holiday sales and get that money in, because, you know, sometimes Bethesda games maybe don't sell too well. I'm not saying Starfield would be that, or the Elder Scrolls obviously, but maybe some of the others, while critically successful, maybe aren't commercially successful. And that's why you saw Bethesda making those deals for Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo, because it eliminates some of that risk, where maybe now they don't have that same financial pressure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it just seems like there's an extra tier of paymasters perhaps that they have to answer to. But I mean, I'm keen to get Luke's opinion on this one.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I was going to basically say what Scott said, actually. I think the inverse is true in that, you know, Starfield probably would have been, it may have still been delayed if Bethesda was independent, but you would have got a more specific date for the delay rather than a pretty significant window in the next year. Because I think, as Scott has said, you know, these companies, I mean, Bethesda aren't Double Fine, so they're a lot more protected against this, but they still suffer from the same issue, which is they need cash flow for ongoing development costs for everything else that they're doing. So, you know, they would have been much more keen to just kind of push this out and get the money, and it still probably would have been successful, albeit, you know, Cyberpunk when it launched was pretty successful. It doesn't have any legs anymore, but it was successful at the start. So, yeah, but I think because, you know, they don't worry about that anymore, and to be fair to Microsoft, I think they're just like, look, you know, let's just, like we did with Halo, let's just take the hit. It will be a better game for it. Obviously, Halo still had a lot of issues, but that more relates to it being a live service game and the kind of ongoing support than the product day one, which was actually very good. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's an interesting point of view, and to be honest, you know, it's probably only really Phil Spencer and a few key people that would be able to answer that fully. It's an interesting one just to see, because, you know, lots of people were saying, you know, Xbox needs to be hands off. I just don't know if they can, because, you know, owning these sort of publishers, they kind of have to fit into Xbox's kind of pattern almost with regards, you know, release windows and stuff like that. But perhaps I'm wrong, and like you say, perhaps actually being owned by Microsoft has done them a favour on some level and perhaps given them a little bit more breathing space. I'm conscious we've had so many questions come in, Pucks. Let's hand this over to the chat. Thank you so much, chat, for being as involved as you are. I have literally got a page and a half of comments that we've captured here, so we'll get through them as quick as we can and we'll get some of them answered.
Yep, no worries. Again, some of these are from about 20 minutes ago, but it's fine. I think we remember most of what we just said. So I'm going to start near the top. So Ash Reviews Games, did Redfall even have a release date, or was it just assumed to be 2022?
Summer 2022.
Yeah.
They
did announce it as summer, yeah.
So when does summer end? Is that the end of September or the end of August, do you think?
End of August, isn't it? Usually?
You reckon August?
End of September.
I'd have said September.
It's also, I think, like the way Americans do seasons is a little differently too. What's fall?
Yeah, I was going to say, would their fall start in October? Any American friends with us? Do you know when fall officially starts? Because in my head, it's November, but that seems kind of the mid-ground. I'm guessing October is Halloween part of fall. Let us know if you're in the chat, if there is an official start date. But,
so apparently, Wednesday, September 22nd was the end of summer in 2021.
Oh, okay.
I don't know when that. It's around the sort of mid to end of September.
Where is that though? Because it obviously would change depending where you are in the world, I guess.
So according to the article I just read, it's based on the astronomical calendar flap. So I believe it would be the same for everyone. Don't quote me on that, though, please.
Well, Australia has their seasons completely opposite to the
I guess
northern hemisphere.
Northern hemisphere, I should probably say. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Right, sorry, Pugs.
That's right. I got more to go through. We've got one here from a Wimbo Koeshi, who's also our very own Sweshy Gaming, who we've not seen for a while. So good to see you here again. They say we were riding on Starfield, being the biggest game from Xbox and Bethesda this year. So yeah, it's a bummer. They might have to change their summer marketing plan.
Well, yeah.
But again, maybe it all depends on what happens in June. So.
Well, perhaps, like I say, it feeds back into the question I asked earlier, and Luke seems to think this might have been known about for a long time, and part of me agrees, because this isn't just like, oh, by the way, it's not going to be ready by November. It wouldn't work like that. Like you say, it would have been on a risk register and probably closely tracked in their weekly/monthly meetings as to, right, are we going to be good to go? Are we going to green light this? So it's probably been coming a while, but it makes you wonder that with the unlikelihood of it releasing this year, whether Microsoft have actually got some contingency plans that they might actually be announcing in the June showcase. So that will be interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely.
Game Pass, third-party Game Pass games. Yeah. I think that's probably it. Because even if they've got Forza, as we discussed, I think they might want, or they will probably want and need something a little bit more. I don't know what's going to be coming out around that time that they can maybe grab, but I imagine maybe someone's got a checkbook open.
Call of Duty.
What, all coming to Game Pass, you mean? That's the big announcement?
Who knows? It depends depends where they are in the deal and whether they would actually be able to. But again, perhaps Luca could answer that one, but who knows?
Yeah, let me get through these comments first. Got quite a few more. A few more from Ash Reviews Games, who says, yep, I still think that Starfield gameplay will be shown at the Xbox Showcase, which I think we all kind of expect. Follows up by saying, I think Halo will have a BR announced on their Xbox show. I know that's not as big as a game release, though.
It's still good news.
That would be the most exciting thing that they show. That's a showcase. If they show anything Halo, whether it be campaign DLC or that BR mode, that would probably easily be the best thing that they show on that show for me.
Well, I follow up by something else Ash Reviews Games has said, which is surprise drop Banjo free on Xbox. Do it, lol. And I know I'd love to see that.
Good luck with that one. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know. Hopes are high, but expectations are very low. BMG says, there is that many games to play currently, plus all of the third-party games to come through the year. Less first-party games would be a welcome to many. Which I can understand. I know the feeling of being enamored with too many big games coming at once.
I guess if you're a multi-platform gamer and you own a Sony product, I'm guessing God of War, if that's still coming this year, obviously at this moment in time, it technically is still coming this year. That may slip, it may not. I mean, that's obviously going to be a big one for gamers, like I say, if they're multi-plat. I think Sony tend to get their first-party titles out quite early, don't they? I don't think they leave it till November and quite late. So I'm guessing September or early October for God of War. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have expected it to launch, even if If Starfield was launching this year, I would have expected it to launch before then. So
Yeah, they don't
September,
tend to
October.
go up against your Call of Duties and stuff, do they? I think they tend to get their first party stuff out a bit earlier than that. So,
A few more here. Pixel Slapper says, "Let's face it, folks. Nobody wants second this year. Elden Ring has broke everyone's BAFTAs." Which, to be fair, it's very high contender this year, isn't it?
I still love Elden Ring. I still love it. How far in are you, Pucks? Just out of interest, are you completed?
I am right near the end. I've beat the Fire Giant, but I've delayed doing the next bit because I had a few more area. I had like the left open area to explore in the snowy bit.
We can go back to it afterwards, but anyway.
Yeah, sure. BMG makes you think what's happened because they had an exact day and date of release. Was it something to do with the guy who broke NDA that caused the delay?
I think that exact date was just more to do with the fact it was 11 years to the day that Skyrim launched. I think it was a nice to have. So I think they kind of jumped on it. They said, I think they I can imagine at some sort of meeting, it's like, we've got an opportunity to release Starfield 11 years to the day after Skyrim. It's a bit of a good marketing spin, and unfortunately, it obviously hasn't come to fruition.
Indie Gamer says the problem with the delays comes down to one thing: them mismanaging expectations. They should never have revealed a release date so early.
Again, I think they just took the opportunity of being able to try and release it 11 years to the day after Skyrim, which is a bit of a silly one, really, isn't it? Because it's not even the same game. If it was a new Skyrim, I could understand it would make a bit more sense. But yeah.
I've just got two more here. BMG says, but with the date being so precise, what has changed them to push it to 2023? Which, again, we've kind of mainly been talking about, I guess. Last but not least, Pixel Slapper again says, this proves Xbox isn't scared of being a tortoise this time around. All the criticism of Halo has helped them grow balls. Sorry for that analysis.
I kind of get it. And to be honest, this isn't new to them. They've cut their teeth on the Halo. And to be honest, to not release Halo on exactly the same day as the console launched, that must have been a massive deal. So this is probably less of a big deal, if that makes any sort of sense. So, their PR department is quite well versed in this, and they, their marketing department, when it does actually launch, will probably do a fantastic job of getting the, all of the positive vibes out there, I suppose. So, interesting.
And that's it for the comments.
Any closing comments on that, Crew, while we're here?
Yeah, actually, one thing, it's okay. It's going to be okay.
Yeah,
don't worry.
Yeah.
Delays are not a bad thing. I've seen a lot of people, talk about doom and gloom, and it's important to remember that you might have to wait an extra 6 months. What's 6 months? You're going to get a game that is hopefully more polished. It's going to be better, and that's kind of what we want. That's actually one of the benefits of Xbox or any major corporation like Sony or Nintendo or whoever purchasing a company like Bethesda or smaller studios like Double Fine, is it gives them the financial security that they can make these decisions that will ultimately benefit the final product that we as consumers get. So it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
don't worry.
And to be honest,
that's the only thing I would say.
Plenty of other stuff to play.
Well, and again, as excited as some people are for Starfield, I don't see many people biting their fingernails down to the bone waiting for Starfield, if you see what I mean. It's a big title. It was a big get for Xbox, but it's like you say, it's okay. If it's delayed, then it's delayed. It's just the way of things lately, isn't it? And like I say, perhaps, I think Indy put about setting expectations. I think perhaps as gamers, we need to perhaps ring fence our own expectations on some level of, wanting a game wanting a game to come out in a certain time frame versus it being ready to come out. And I think, there will be a lot of focus on God of War on this, because this is the big Xbox first party title of this year that's had to be moved. And there was already a lot of questions around whether God of War will actually release this year. And this isn't a Sony versus Xbox thing at all, but it is a kind of, in the gaming sphere, like I say, just getting your own expectations set for, or actually, if God of War slips to March next year, then again, like you said, Scott, it's no huge deal. Do you know what I mean? We're still getting the game. It's not like it's been cancelled. And, like Luke said earlier, I'd rather it just be a game that works on day one, probably more so than the sort of the Halo situation we've ended up in, where it's just a bit piecemeal with what's going on. Do you know what I mean? I know it's a slightly different problem in the fact that Halo's obviously a live service game. But do you know what I mean? Just that kind of trickle feeding, things getting better. But wow. Well, thank you, chat. That was a fantastic topic, chat. You really got involved in that. That's fantastic. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And it was always going to be a big topic, and it landed at our feet today, so we took the opportunity of capitalising on that. This next one's quite an interesting one. I don't know how many, what kind of legs this topic has. Perhaps we'll come to you, Scott, on this one, because you was the first one that put it on my radar, really. And it's around, well, not necessarily Series S, but everyone's pitching it from Series S, around a new patent that Xbox have filed, allowing disc-based games to be played on, well, like I say, the pitch is Series S, but I'm guessing any non-disc-based Xbox potentially, so like the Xbox One S, potentially, I guess it could work for. And I also had thoughts around whether it could work for the streaming service, which might sound a little bit odd. I think it depends on how they plan to authenticate a game disc to an account, if that makes sense. So if you could do it from a PC, then technically you could actually play disc-based games on a streaming-only service, which sounds crazy. But what details do we have about it so far?
Yeah, we don't have an awful lot, to be perfectly honest. It was funny because I think when we put the topics out, I was like, hold on, the Series S doesn't have a disc drive. It's like, yeah, we know. That's kind of the point. So it's funny because this is actually first talked about, I think, all the way back in 2018, 2019 by Rad Sams. He originally talked about how Microsoft would maybe planning some sort of solution that would allow you to maybe go to a store and almost trade in a physical game for a digital version of that game to allow you to play physical games that you own on a console without a disc drive. Obviously, the Series S doesn't have a disc drive. The One S, or there was a discless One S. I suspect that we're maybe not too far off in the future seeing maybe a Series X without a disc drive. We don't know what the future holds, but essentially there was a new patent that came out. And this was courtesy of Game Rant, actually. And the solution sounds interesting. I'd be curious to get you guys' opinions on how you think this could work. So a very simple patent, which basically would allow somebody without a disk drive on the console to essentially put their disc in an external device. It's almost like an external disc drive, and I'm getting HD DVD flashbacks here. I don't know if you guys ever had one of them for the 360. And essentially, you would be able to put your disc in this external disc drive that would then verify that you own that game, and then essentially transfer digital ownership of that title to you. There's not too much details on it in terms of whether you would always have to have the disc in there, what would then happen to that disc? Could it be done multiple times or not? But essentially, it does sound like maybe an interesting way for people who have maybe got larger back catalogs going all the way back to the Xbox 360, well, the Xbox 360 and Xbox One, to possibly play those games on their Series S or any future discless console, or even, like you say, maybe in the cloud flap for those who don't have the console. So yeah, like I say, the patent is interesting because it specifically refers to an external device that you would have to use. So whether that's attached to a PC or you would plug it into the Series S, how do you think that could work?
Sorry. Game discs, as far as I'm aware, aren't serialized. They don't have a unique identifier on them, like a serial number or a barcode. So every disc that's produced is the same as the one previous. So I can only see this working if you had a disc in a disc drive, and that it would be authenticated every time you want to play it. I think if it was serialized, you could then assign that serial number of that game disc to an account that couldn't then be used elsewhere. Go on, Pux. I'm interested to hear your take.
Well, I first just want to read a snippet from an article that takes a cut of the actual patent filing. And this was earlier today. So it actually starts off by saying, to address such challenges of playing previous generation physical video game media on next generation digital video game devices, the present disclosure describes systems and methods for providing software ownership and validation of optical discs using secondary devices. In aspects, a local network may comprise at least a first and second device. So whether or not that means... It's interesting because I've also seen some articles and other discussions online going to kind of almost a bit left field, a bit ridiculous with it. People saying that, would you put like an old 360 disc in, for example, and then something would happen to then make that disc unusable, which I thought was an absolutely ridiculous thing to consider. But
scratches the bottom of it, Pucks.
Yeah.
It's got like a shredder underneath it once it's done it.
You can imagine, can't you? It just rips the game, the disc up inside. But
it's interesting though, because you're probably right. There's probably no way of doing it without having the disc in present, like you do with the Series X at the moment. You've got to have the disc in if you want to play disc games. And I guess while it's an interesting concept, I kind of think, what's the point? Because at that point, why don't you just release a disc version of the Series S? Or if you wanted to play disc games, why wouldn't you just get the Series X? Because this device is obviously going to have costs attributed to it.
In a way, I read it, but it's that first part of that patent filing I find interesting when they say to address such challenges with playing previous generation media on next gen digital, because the back compatibility program, whatever the official name is, that's obviously ended. Main reasons being because they reached the limits of being able to renew licenses to bring things up to today. So you can arguably, by saying you've got a disc that's licensed on the year of print, so that license exists for that title as of, say, 2001, if you're thinking of an original Xbox game. So in a way, to be able to, I feel like some of the things I've been reading almost feels like it's an extension of that program, so that you're able to put a disc into some secondary device, whether it's on a Series S or maybe directly in your X, and then upload it that way, because you still have to play it by some means anyway. And with any form of secondary device, most things now are capable of burning by default, as well as just reading or writing. Just reading discs. So I don't see why you couldn't have the system create its own package file or whatever the format is for Xbox games, and then store it that way, and then create a license for you that is then stored against your account, perhaps. I do wonder then how it works, because, if I didn't own a specific game, say the Xbox or the original 360, I could say to you, Flap, that, have you got that game? I just want to quickly add it to my library, and then I then give you the disc for your own personal preservation.
Yeah, no, this is why I think you will constantly need the disc. I think it will predominantly be PC based. So if you can get a disc in a PC, and somehow it could authenticate it, then any Xbox on your local network may have access to that particular game all of the time that the disc is in the drive, if that makes sense. That's the only way I can see it working. Let's go to Luke on this one if we can. Luke, this is a very niche thing, isn't it? And Xbox aren't scared of tackling niche issues or problems. I'm not convinced it's actually a problem. They are quite consumer friendly. But this seems really niche. Is this kind of a surprising move for you? Do you think many people will actually be using this?
Yeah, it's pretty surprising. It's definitely niche, I would think. There might be a higher uptick of people that use it than anticipated, particularly if there's a lot of back compat games that they have. They may want to take advantage of it solely for that alone, if it's possible. But otherwise, yeah, it's just a bit of a strange one to me. But I'm not again quite sure why Microsoft felt compelled to do it more than anything. Like, why? Great for a cool feature for consumers, but why bother? Because it seems like it would be a pretty significant effort for Microsoft. It's not just an easy thing to do, right? A lot of R&D probably has to go into this. So,
but it's so niche. I can't even imagine them using this as a marketing tool to sell more Xbox Series S's.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be, though, would it? It wouldn't
just
be a
be like a
tool.
feature of the, well, not even a feature, just something you can do. But that's why it's weird. I mean, how do you even get that information out there? How do you say how do you explain to people?
Exactly.
How do you explain to people? If you know what I mean, like what instructions do you put together for that?
The thing that makes me laugh is this really at the top of their to-do list Do you know what I mean? Is there nothing better because they still haven't fixed the bloody DVR in the Series X? I'd rather them fix that than piss around doing all of this. Do you know what I mean?
Is it just the patent at the minute? Is that the only thing?
It is.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe just like an example in the patent that's highlighted that maybe gives you maybe an idea of how it could work is if you look at the pictures. It's quite obviously one of them is an Xbox One and one of the other devices is a diskless Xbox. So I guess in theory, based on the pictures, if you've got an Xbox One and an Xbox Series S, you could in theory put your Xbox One games in your Xbox One and that would authenticate you to be able to play those games on your Series S without having to play them on your Xbox One. So Xbox One could be that external device based on that.
Yeah, but is the mistake that we and most people are making with this, pitching this at the Series S, is this potentially a move for the future, do you think? Because you've already said there could be a Series X, a diskless Series X that comes out, or perhaps the console beyond the Series X, will it have a disk drive at all? So are they putting plans in place for us to actually be able to access game discs that we buy now on future consoles, do you think?
Yeah, I guess it's very possible. I mean, it could be that this is a tool to just impact I guess help customers transition from one generation to the next. So from Xbox One to Xbox Series, if people can take their disc-based games, that might encourage people to go out and pick up a Series S who are maybe still on the Xbox One hardware. And then maybe, going from the Series generation to whatever the next generation is. If you've got a Series X and the next console, it happens to be diskless, maybe there's only diskless consoles in the next generation, or maybe again, they go for a two-tier approach. Then if you still got your Series X, I mean, it's a bloody big thing to just have lying around. But again, in theory, you could use your Series X discs to authenticate on the next generation. I guess I still do think it's awfully niche though, because how many people are going to do that? And also, if it's for this generation or the transition from last to this, I think it feels a bit late. A lot of people have already started making that transition or have already made that transition. But I guess that's the interesting thing about using an external device, because it means that even if you've bought a Series S, if they do release some external device that you could use, then in theory, you could still do it. And also there are games now that you can only get physically because the digital license has been removed, but you could pick up a copy off eBay or CEX or something like that, that in theory could allow you to play where otherwise you wouldn't be able to. So
Deadpool's a game like that. I think the licensing thing fell through on Deadpool. I really like the Deadpool game as well. Not many people have played it. I think it's brilliant. You can't get that digitally anymore.
Can I just add something as well? Because I'm actually on the patent page. I mean, it's like a massive wall of text, but I've just seen a particular part which I think is interesting, which kind of backs up what some of you guys have been saying anyway. So I'm going to skip some of it. So there's one part that says, where the present disclosure describes systems and methods for providing software ownership validation of optical discs using secondary devices. And it goes on for another thing about, it's talking about potential LAN connections as well. So for instance, the first and second device may be connected to a local area network that is accessible by one or more users. Alternatively, the first and second device may not be connected to the same local network. But for instance, the first device may be connected to a first local network and the second device may be connected to a second one, and then they communicate through the internet or via a distributed network system. So there's definitely some weird mechanism where I think, as you said, Flat, that you definitely have to have the disk in at some point at all times in this theoretical system. And it somehow looks like it could jump between the internet or your LAN or whatever that looks like, to validate your software ownership via the hardware, physical, optical media. So I don't know. It seems like more of the more I'm looking into it, the more it looks like an interesting idea, but something that may ultimately be not worth investing much money in.
And to be honest,
if it means having an external device, right?
Yeah, but like Scott said, it is only a patent at this point. I guess it does show some level of intent or at least focus. And like you say, perhaps this might be a bit more of a window for the future than we realise. We're like I say, we're putting the now context on it, but perhaps this is for going forwards.
I suppose the other thing to remember as well, again, as you say, because this is just a patent, it could all well not happen. But at the same time, that patent is now registered under Microsoft, so there's nothing stopping them from using this and utilizing something similar to then create something else which utilizes this, because they've now locked in this method of potentially doing something, which is the idea, right? Someone else wants to do the same thing via the same method. Oh no, you can't, because look, Microsoft have the patent for that tech now. You have to do it a different way. So in the best case, they've locked themselves into to help themselves for the future, perhaps. Sorry, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think if anything, it kind of just signals a bit of intent that Microsoft is planning for an all digital transition, and they want some sort of solution in place. Like I say, Brad Sam's original report from back in 2018, the method that he described, which I don't think there's any reason to not believe Brad Sam's considering his track record, was essentially you could take your disc to a Microsoft store, they would give you a digital code for that game, and then they would take the disc off you, essentially. So if that reporting was accurate, and then you combine that with this patent, then that at least shows some intent from Microsoft that they're looking at solutions, whether this is the solution or not. And I suspect probably not. They're looking at solutions to help people transition to a diskless console or an all digital future where, you're not going to have a disk drive, or you're not going to buy games from Amazon anymore. You're just going to either get them from Game Pass or from the Microsoft Store directly.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Comments to read out before
let's catch up with the comments. Yeah,
I got one here from Back from the Dead, who says they could possibly have a service in partnership with GameStop where they would have a disk drive that could give you the license information. Basically, you just said that, Scott, and I kind of thought about that, which prior to that comment as well, and I thought it just doesn't that seem very 2000s though, to physically have to go somewhere, trade in your disc for a code rather than doing it from the comfort of your home. But then the other side of the coin is so many preservationists out there who want to convert their libraries to digital formats, but they want to preserve that physical media. So I appreciate you can't have it all, but there is a niche, but quite a large market of people that do think that way, I believe. But yeah, who's to know? BMG says, it just seems so stupid of a thing having to do. Wouldn't it be more cost effective to them and a customer to just make it sorry, it's not, some of the text is a bit weird. Cost effective to them and customers just to make it Vinley needs to ping the network once every couple of weeks. Sorry, I'm trying to interpret what the typo is there, but yeah, pinging a network effectively.
Yeah, I think basically what he's saying is that you would authenticate the disk to an account, and that would last for 72 hours or something like that. Yeah, I think Jesse B on
so Jesse B says the same thing. Yeah, something that can at least leave a token for 72 hours might even be enough. You're not going to have a lot of times where the system is down for longer than that, which is true. It's rare nowadays for systems to be down long. I mean, it has happened, but one-offs in the last 10-15 years is considered pretty rare. So. And lastly, Ash Reviews Games in the chat has also just said, I'm a physical media person for the most part. It's why I decided to hold off buying a Series S. So, people do exist still that love physical media.
That is a fantastic segue into our third topic of DRM management, or digital rights management, and the issues that Xbox Live had over the last weekend. Before we dive into that, I want to thank the chat again. Fantastic comments flowing through the chat. It's brilliant. If you're listening, you're not involved in the chat, just say hi. We're a friendly bunch. Obviously, again, after the show, if there's any comments, if you disagree with anything we say, leave a comment below. We'll come back to you on that. But so let's move into topic 3. And like I say, it's kind of linked, and this comes into the server outage that Microsoft or Xbox was experiencing over last weekend and a few times before that as well. I think there's been a few ups and downs with the Xbox Live service. This one seemed to specifically knock out local single player games. I was affected by this and there were tweets saying, well, if you make your console the home console, it gets rid of this issue. I can tell you right now that my console is already set as a home console and that didn't fix it. So there are instances out there where that didn't help. The one thing I didn't try and probably should have done and may fix it is to actually set your console into offline mode. If you go to network settings on a Series X or S, go to network settings, even on an Xbox One, and just set it to offline, I think it then reverts back to the local authentication of games that you own against your account. And then when you obviously log back into Xbox Live, it then re-authenticates those on a regular basis. Luke, is this something that you experienced? Are you surprised, given the Xbox One debacle in 2014 around this kind of thing, that Xbox, that this is still a thing for Xbox? Because it kind of leaves a bit of a bad taste in the mouth for gamers who have spent X amount of pounds on their games, single player, that they just can't get access to.
To answer your question, no, I wasn't on my Xbox at all that day, so I didn't suffer from it or anything like that. But I'm not. I did hear about this, and I read up a little bit, but I think maybe some others have more of an understanding of why the reason was for this. But in any case, do I think it's surprising? Not necessarily, because we've been trending towards this for a while. This kind of digital ecosystem future where there is an increasing potential for this to happen, and kind of a lot of the way in which these authentication systems work is effectively completely tied to the cloud or online. So obviously back in 2013 there was big furore about that, which I think was justified at the time, but we've kind of the thing is, people have trended towards a digital future anyway, and so we've kind of arrived there naturally. It's still not great at all that these kind of problems exist, and that they can rear their heads sometimes, because I don't think anybody wants that. The reason for going digital is convenience more than anything. It's a pretty significant factor. So if you can't actually play your games or play other people's games, if you're sharing a console or whatever, then that's really frustrating. Not not a good week for them, really. Microsoft, or not a good couple of weeks for Xbox. So along with the news today, that they kind of coalesced in tandem, as it were, to create a kind of a bit of a rough week. But as long as they try and avoid stuff like that in the future, they'll be fine. But I'm sure they'll have learned from it.
Well, I mean, Pucks mentioned earlier, surprised that they mentioned Starfield and Redfall. I think it's just a double punch. If you're gonna deliver bad news, you might as well deliver all of it in one go rather than trickle feed the bad news. And you're right. Sorry, I got my dates wrong. It was 2013 that the Xbox One launched. I don't know where 2014 came from. Scott. I'm a bit dismayed by it, to be honest. It does feel like, for the money that we spend, we as gamers are kind of held to ransom. And I know the focus is on Xbox because that's probably the latest one that's happened. But to be honest, all three, and I'm obviously including PlayStation, Nintendo in that as well, are probably guilty of this to some point, where we're actually held to ransom for money that we've spent because, like Luke said, we need access to the cloud for some level of authentication. It doesn't leave kind of a good taste in the mouth, should we say, for the want of a better phrase, for becoming digital only, because like you say, it was supposed to be more convenient, but actually there is all of a sudden a single point of failure, and when that single point of failure goes down, you lose all of your games. It's not just the odd one, you lose everything. It's not a great look for modern day gaming, is it, in general?
It's not, no. And I think, a lot of this just comes down to Microsoft's original pitch all the way back in 2013. Yeah, they made some changes to that pitch, but a lot of what we have now, even in the series generation, it still stems from their original vision, because they couldn't change fundamentally how it worked. They removed some elements, such as the 24-hour check-in, but there was, the functionality is still more or less the same as it was back then. I think some of it comes down to messaging and error reporting and things like that, because as you said, Flap, you didn't try the offline mode, and I think in most cases that actually resolved people's issues. Because essentially,
the only reason I know that is because I used to travel away in hotels a lot, and as you know, hotel Wi-Fi is incredibly flaky, and I used to take my 1X at the time And I used to get to the hotel, and you'd log into their Wi-Fi, and it just wouldn't work. It would be really patchy and flaky.
Yeah.
So I learned the whole offline trick. So I know that there is a
Yeah.
level of localized authentication. Like you say, perhaps it's a 24-hour one that needs to be updated. But yeah, it's not common knowledge, is it? That's not common knowledge.
It's not, and the console doesn't give you any indication that that's what you probably should do, because essentially what the console's trying to do, and the problem that the problem that it's got is this also impacted digital games like Halo Infinite, which is free to play, wouldn't load for me, even though it could have still loaded the free to play version. It doesn't need a license necessarily to let me play that. The messaging's crap. It doesn't say it's having issues, but what it's trying to do is it's trying to authenticate, and it's not recognizing that Xbox is having issues. It's just saying, oh shit, I can't authenticate, so no, you can't play this game. And by putting your consoles offline, it eliminates that check, providing your console is the home console. I'll come on to that a bit more in a minute. But I don't know if you knew this, guys. It turns out, and this came courtesy of an Xbox engineer actually who posted over on Reset Era. Did you guys know that you have to launch the game at least once while online in order for it to work as your home console?
Oh, okay. So that's interesting. So it needs to dial home and authenticate at least once, which then probably uploads a localized authentication token or something. Right. Okay.
Something like that. Yeah. So if you downloaded a game, a single player game yesterday, and then Xbox goes down today, and you've not opened that game before, you set your console offline. It's your home console. Essentially, because you've not loaded that game once prior to Xbox going off, it doesn't have that information that would allow it to load. So there was issues being reported by people. This mainly impacted people who game share. So like myself, I was able to access my friend's games who I game share with that he purchased, because my console is his account's home console. Yeah. So I could access his games. I couldn't access my own. And then the big issue is my account's the one with Game Pass Ultimate, so I couldn't access any Game Pass Ultimate games because it couldn't do that authentication, while he had access to all the Game Pass Ultimate games, but not his own. So yeah, and then the whole, but there's nothing that tells you. It just shits the bed. There's nothing that actually tells you, like it should maybe come and go, oh, Xbox Live's having an issue. Have you considered having your Xbox?
Exactly.
Setting your Xbox to offline. Here's a button that does it automatically for you. And the engineer on Reset Era that posted said pretty much that they need to improve that level of communication or how it reports it to users that there's problems. But it is a shame, because we've literally just talked about it with the whole disk drive thing. A couple of the guys mentioned in the chat that it should hold a token for 72 hours, maybe a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever. That means in the periods of downtime, you can still access your games, because there's a token that it's got that's maybe expires in 72 hours, and you would like to think downtime isn't going to last longer than that, and it means you can continue to access your games. So there's got to be a better solution that means we can still play the games that we own, even if they're having issues.
I know, Puxley, I know you feel quite strongly around disc-based games and things like that, and that on some level is your preference. And to me, if the service goes down and we lose access to Game Pass games, that feels like less of a blow to me than individual games that I've actually spent my money on. I know you could argue you spent money on the subscription service, but games that I've specifically gone out of my way to buy, and let's face it, they could be anything up to 70 quid's worth of games if you're buying the latest whatever. Call of Duty, for instance, if you'd bought that, and not only that, if you're buying the super duper gold plated deluxe version, you could be looking at £100, quite a way north of £100 as well for these games, and all of a sudden there's an issue in some data center and you just cannot play these games. You must feel quite strongly about this, because like I say, I think your preference is disc-based games, and it doesn't sorry, there's kind of a bolt on to that as well, because it doesn't really sit with Microsoft's game preservation sort of angle as well, because they've done really well for backwards compatible titles, but all of a sudden you're realizing the vulnerabilities of this single point of failure that blows all of that out of the water if something was to go wrong.
Yeah, I have very polarizing opinions of this, and I'm going to be saying one stuff 1 minute and then the opposite the other, because I do switch between the two perspectives. It's very difficult. I mean, DRM is of course it's a necessary evil, because piracy is rife. It is a big thing, and despite what the internet may tell you, it does affect companies quite severely, especially smaller ones. I remember seeing a number of articles saying that, oh, there's been proof that, or articles or reports and research that, oh, for big companies, yeah, piracy doesn't actually affect them that much at all. And it's just like, well, no, of course it does, because even the biggest companies lose hundreds of millions of dollars or pounds, whatever the local currency is, when people pirate games. So DRM is a necessary evil, unfortunately, but it's all in the implementation. I know on PC it's very flaky because the DRM is put onto the product directly, whereas on Xbox it's OS and platform agnostic and how it's implemented, which for the most part is the more, I suppose, standard or better way to do it, I guess, rather than keeping it on the game. But yeah, this idea that yes, it's a necessary evil, but I think there's a limit. And I appreciate, Scott said this, read out the article from the Xbox engineer. I read that a couple of days ago, and I understood what he was saying. For most part, it makes perfect sense. But as I was reading it, it almost feels like there's an implementation detail which is missing, or something needs to be changed or altered in some way. Because, I mean, for example, to answer the original question you first said about this flap, it did affect me. I was playing Trek to Yomi at the time.
Oh, okay.
I was mid-game. I was going, making my way through, going for some particularly challenging bit. Very much solely single player. There's no online. Apart from obviously connecting to the Xbox service for achievements or whatever else, there's no online features in the game at all. It's a solely offline single player game, and out of the blue, out of nowhere, it cut out. It quit straight to Xbox dashboard and came up saying, "Oh, you do not have the rights to play this game. Please check your network connection." And that's going through the network checks on the system. It goes, "Oh, your connection's fine. It's our end that has the problem at the moment." And I remember reading it thinking like, "What?" Most like other people. And what I got a bit irritated reading comments online as well, who were saying, "Oh, it's obvious. People just don't know you have to set it as your home console, and that's the way you do it."
It's not. It's not obvious. That's not obvious.
But even if that is the solution, you as the user should not have to do that. That should happen by default.
Am I correct in thinking that there is only a certain amount of times you can do that in a 12-month period as well? Isn't it something like 4 times?
That you can
No. That's switching. That's switching what your home console is. But setting it off.
That's what we're saying.
But setting it off. Oh, apologies. I thought you meant sort of setting it offline. But yeah, there is a limit. Yeah, apologies. I misunderstood. I think it's 5.
Which I think so. I've only got obviously the one Xbox, right? So I would expect mine to default as my home one. I shouldn't have to. People saying, "Oh, but you have to manually do it," and it's like, but I don't see the problem with doing that. And it's like, well, it is a problem, because you as Mr. Tech Head may think it's not an issue or not an issue because you're completely into it. That's fine for 1 or 2 people, but when you're considering a product which works for the masses, regardless of your technical knowledge and prowess and how much you care about that kind of stuff, at the end of the day, you're buying a box which should be able to either put a disc in, depending on which one you have, but either way, it plays games. That's what you buy it for, and you should be able to just get the box and use it and play games with minimal issue. So when your people are saying online that, oh, you just have to go into all these settings and change this and that, and then, as you said, you toggle offline mode. It's like, no, you should not have to manually do that. You should, if the servers go offline, your system should have some mechanism of saying, I can't authenticate you. You as a local network are connected to the internet, but I can't connect to the server. Therefore, there must be a problem. I will ping into it every couple of milliseconds or whatever else. But for the meantime, I will turn into offline mode so that you will do local authentication and jump into the game. Even if it's Game Pass, you were saying the servers are down, you can't authenticate. But as Scott was saying, this engineer guy said you have to be logged in online at least once when you load up a game to give it the license to you. Even if you're on a Game Pass Ultimate subscription, you're giving that authentication happens in the background as part of that process. So if you've got a product downloaded, it's going to check whether or not, okay, do you own this via your own key? No. oh, but do you have Game Pass? Yes. Oh, okay. So you've got the key via Game Pass. So here's your key, and it's it'll be stored on a local like metadata or a local header file with that executable in your system, right? So it should there should be minimal issue. I can appreciate maybe it kicking you out because it's maybe doing a bit of toing and throwing of the game, which is unfortunate, but I would still expect you to be able to just load straight into the game with minimal fuss because your Xbox should default into a different mode because it can't authenticate at that moment in time and just ping into it once it works. And the fact that it doesn't do that and people online are saying that you should just do this other stuff, I don't see what the big deal is. It is a big deal because the majority of people out there aren't super into tech and don't want to get into the weeds of the details. And it's more about the more global user experience rather than just the Xbox is for the hardcore gamers only, because it's not. These companies are wanting to branch out to your hardcores and the casuals. This is why Microsoft are creating this big Game Pass gaming everywhere initiative. It's to get as many people into games as possible. So for people to say that this isn't a big deal, I have a real trouble with. I got quite passionate then. I apologise for my seemingly big outburst.
No, I completely agree, and it is, it's one of those things. It's our hobby. It's something we pay through the bloody nose for, and to be denied it through something that's, through no fault of our own, is of high frustration levels. And like I say, I know Xbox are in the spotlight at the moment, but I don't suppose they're the only ones by any stretch that could be in this predicament, shall we say?
I think the reason why. Go on.
No, go on.
I think the reason why Xbox are more in the spotlight with this, in a way, again, I'm not hating on Xbox at all. Let me just make that clear. But with something like Game Pass, I do understand that if something happened where the Game Pass servers or whatever the mechanism is to serve Game Pass as a function, as a piece of infrastructure that you give to people, because of the fact, as you say, you're buying into a subscription service, you don't pay for the games themselves individually. So if something is wrong with that service, I can understand. If something went wrong there, then you can't play because, of course, you're not, because maybe there's an issue with trying to authenticate. But I think you mentioned in your original question as well about, but if you've paid 70 quid for your own copy of the game, like I own this game in my hands, I should be able to put the disc in and play it. If I can't do that, that is a big problem because you shouldn't have to authenticate online to do that. Like back to the PlayStation 1 days, right? Or something as simple as that, even though it's obviously improved since then, but you still have something on the disc that you'd read to say this is a genuine disc, yes or no, and then authenticate that way, rather than having to, oh no, but you need to ping to the server at least once to verify this. It's like, well, no, because you should be able to check that you've got a legit disc like you've been doing for the last 20 years.
Do we know if it actually? Do we know if it affected disc-based games at all? Because the only games I was trying was digital ones, to be honest. So I'd like to think that the authentication happens at the disc level. So you've got the genuine Xbox disc in the disc drive. It should authenticate at that point, I'm guessing. But Luke, let's come to yourself, Luke, and I'm coming to you because of your PC gaming. DRM in the PC sphere has had a very rocky history, and up till quite recently, I can't remember the recent title where the DRM was really affecting the gameplay in terms of the performance, in terms of frames and things like that. Which is the lesser of two evils, do you think? Is it the sort of the cloud-based authentication, or it being sort of hard baked into the game?
Probably the cloud-based ones. It rings a bell. I can't remember what game there was fairly recently, but rings a bell with the one that had massive DRM performance issue problems. Having said that, there's been a lot of games over the last couple of years that have had some DRM or de novo or something like that. Performance hit effectively. I can't remember which one, but anyway, probably the cloud ones. I mean, it's not some. Being honest, it's not something that's genuinely or greatly affected me, even over the last few years on any platform, to be honest. But maybe I've just been lucky with that, because I think that's part of it. Because sometimes this stuff happens very randomly, very sporadically, and I can't remember. I think, in fact, the last time I really had an issue like this was at the launch of Diablo 3, if people remember that, which had
I know.
terrible DRM and server issues day one, owing to all sorts of authentication issues, problems with the server connecting. It was just awful. And obviously that game was essentially a single player led game, right? It had multiplayer features, and that's what made that so galling. But anyway, so it's been a long time, so I'm not as live to what's going on with this as maybe other people are, especially those who've experienced it recently. But I think no matter what the kind of DRM, whether it's kind of hard baked into the disk or cloud based, either way, it's not good. It's not enjoyable when it goes wrong.
Yeah, I guess with the localized DRM, you are literally, it can be on a game by game basis. I guess the downside with the cloud based authentication is a single point of failure, and you can lose the whole lot in one go. So yeah, I guess there's sort of ups and downs. It always makes me laugh because whenever these sort of services go down, and I can always imagine probably somewhere in the States there's this on-call engineer that's getting a panicky phone call saying Xbox Live's down, the servers are down, you've got to get to the data center and fix this. And just imagine him making a panicky trip to go and either reset a server or something. Probably if it's Windows 11 based, probably to update some sort of driver or sort of software. Piracy software or something like that. I don't know. But Pucks, where are we with the chat? We've had some fair chat with this one.
Yeah, a few. So Jesse B says, didn't have the problem because all the games I played had been launched. I did turn any Xboxes off, usually on for remote install. I never had a problem all weekend.
Okay, good. Well done.
Jesse continues saying, it's because they're all licenses. They will do anything not to sell you a game and give you the rights to unrestricted access.
So, and Jesse's mentioned this a few times. And like I say, I'm sat here feeling sorry for myself, thinking, well, I've spent 70 quid on Call of Duty. I have every right to be able to play it and da. But like I think he pointed out, it's you only own the license to it, I guess, on some level. And if that's managed elsewhere, then I don't know. Like you say, you got passionate about it earlier. It just doesn't sit right with me, I suppose. But it's getting your head round the whole owning a software token rather than the actual software itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of my passionate speech earlier, which I didn't quite intend to get so big about, but I think Luke said it as well. We are deep within a digital age now where things are becoming solely digital. So it's going to happen at some point, and for the most part, people I think will need to accept that you won't actually own anything anymore. You will just buy into the rights to be able to access that content. I mean, look at Netflix and Spotify. You don't pay for that to use yourself anymore. You're just paying for the access to listen to it from someone else or watch it. And equally, things like Game Pass, if they become more mainstream across other platforms, you're only paying for the rights to access that title for as long as you're paying into the subscription, and they can get rid of that from you at any time. You have no control. And if that's the way it's going, which is unfortunate to some degree, depending on the pros and cons, but do we as people just have to accept that that's what's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years?
Well, I think Luke kind of hit the nail on the head. This happens so infrequently. So, even for us to feel as passionate about it as we do is a little bit disproportionate, I think, compared to how often it happens. But I think the other thing that this has highlighted is just how vulnerable our digital library is to a server being shut down X number of years into the future. And like I say, it does seem to fly in the face of Xbox's program of sort of game preservation and backwards compatibility. So, perhaps our gaming future isn't quite as at risk as it may seem, but it's certainly something that's been highlighted that was perhaps not necessarily on everyone's radar.
Yeah. Ash Reviews Games, I think I just said it myself actually, but they say we are definitely moving into a digital future. Can't say I'm into it, but it is inevitable. Which I agree. Jesse B again says, and people aren't aware that GameShare has that caveat. This is regarding, I think, you, Scott, when you said because someone else, a friend of yours, is your console is for them, and they couldn't access their own games. Yeah, they say, and people aren't aware of that GameShare has that caveat. It's a good system, but explanation is everything. They continue. Switching home console is like 5 total times over the life of the console. It's not even yearly. Is that correct?
It is. No, that's 12 months. I'm sure it's a rolling 12 months.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I posted it in the chat as well. There's a link to the support website. It does say 5 times in any 1 year period.
But the fact that we've got two differing opinions off the bat shows that it's not particularly well communicated. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. This whole thing, I think, a lot of it comes down to just, and this is no fault of the consumer, but just a lack of understanding about how these systems work, which is largely down to the messages that you're presented by your Xbox. So,
absolutely.
Last but not least is from Sweshy Gaming, who says that was very passionate. Yes, it was. And Pixel Snap has also said never apologize for passion. So I revoke my apology, and I do mean everything I say.
So you're going to retract his apologies.
Yeah. Hey, but that's why we're here, right? I mean, we love gaming, and that's why we talk about it, whether it's good and bad stuff. So, yeah, it's what it is. What it is.
Fantastic. Well, I've just seen we've got Boxenberger in the chat. Thank you very much. We do have a special show lined up with Archimedes after the Xbox game showcase. So keep your ears to the ground on the socials around more details with that. So it's going to be fantastic. Looking forward to that already. And obviously, Indie Gamer, great to have you back in the chat. Obviously, it's been a little while. I know perhaps time schedules haven't necessarily aligned with us moving away from Sunday evenings. I know that's probably had a very detrimental impact on the amount of eyes that watch this program, and no one feels it more than us, trust me. But I still think it was the right decision for our own personal lives, just to give us our Sunday back in the evening and stuff. But one thing I just wanted to address, and Boxenberg has been saying that he's been playing Trek to Yomi. I just want to do a quick round robin of everyone. Have you played it? What did you make of it? Just quickly, Pucks.
Yeah, I have played it. I'm still playing it, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think I said to Indy in the chat as well that I've not completed it yet, but I think I'm quite a few chapters in now. And yeah, the story's gone in a particular direction I didn't expect it to, but in a really interesting way. So,
well, don't spoil it because I'm only on chapter 1.
No, definitely not. Definitely
cool.
not. It's but it definitely gets exciting.
Oh, cool. Luke, is this your kind of game? I guess it might be. Devolver.
Yeah, I haven't played it yet.
That surprises me.
Yeah, I was very much looking forward to it, and I will play it. I was a bit tentative from the gameplay footage they showed, which I think was a couple of weeks before the launch, particularly the combat, which didn't look good at all from that. And
I found it very linear. Does the combat evolve, Pucks?
You do unlock, like extra moves or extra key combinations to press. But to be fair, I mean, me and Indy were kind of saying it in the chat as well, or maybe not so much Indy as me, but yeah, I'm not a massive fan of the combat. It definitely, because I'm playing Elden Ring and Trek to Yomi as well. When I die or get hit in Elden Ring, I feel it's my fault. It's not just the game being stupid, but there are times when I've died in combat in ways which I feel I should have actually blocked a hit or things like that. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it's quite together or fair, but it doesn't necessarily deter from the enjoyment of the game.
No, fair enough. I think you're right to feel like that, Luke. I guess that's not it's not a showstopper for you, is it?
No, I mean, yeah, my concern from the trailer wasn't even so much the depth of the combat. I didn't expect it to be that deep. It's the weight. It seemed very kind of not tactile or anything like that. Kind of weird. And to be honest, most of the reviews have backed that up. So, and I watched Indy's review, which is excellent, by the way. So people should watch that. So I will, on the strength of his recommendation, try it, of course. And I think a lot of other stuff in that game looks and sounds amazing. Presentation, story sounds cool, all of that stuff. But yeah.
I really enjoy the black and white aesthetic, and I don't know if that changes through the game or if it stays throughout the game. But I really enjoy that aspect. And at first, it's kind of I wouldn't say shocking, but you kind of notice it, and then you don't notice it, and then you'll catch yourself thinking, "Oh, this is in black and white." I don't know. It's a very there are other games that have pulled off the whole black and white thing, obviously, but it just seems to work really well with this. Scott, Trek to Yomi, have you tried it? What did you make of it? If you have.
Yeah, I haven't finished it just yet. I'm only into chapter 2, but I've really enjoyed what I've played so far. I think the atmosphere is good. The the way it looks, the soundtrack, the sort of film grain effect that they've got. I actually turned that off to see what it looked like. I thought actually no, I'll like it with it on kind of. I imagine that was the original they were going for. I thought the combat so far is good. There's been a few new mechanics that they've introduced, even just throughout that first chapter, that I thought was good. It's kind of difficult in places as well. I think the mastering the parry, which I think is going to be really important in the game, is the timing on that's a little tricky. But I'm really enjoying it so far, and I'm looking forward to finishing it.
Fantastic. Well, and again, being available on Game Pass makes it an even sweeter deal, as long as the servers are up, obviously. So, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, GPG Crew. It's always a pleasure to share our thoughts and opinions amongst ourselves, but also, more importantly, with the chat. Thank you. Always point to that side. That's where my screen is with all of the chat. Thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure. I've seen some old regular faces in the chat that we've not seen for a while, especially Boxenberger, Indie Gamer. Great to see you guys back. Pixel Slapper, 3-Bit was in earlier. Fantastic. Anyone new to the channel, thank you for being here. Hope you've enjoyed it. Like I say, hit the like, share and subscribe button. If you want to carry on the discussions, or if you disagree with anything that we've said, please join our Discord server. Again, we're a friendly bunch. We don't bite. Or alternatively, just leave comments in the YouTube below if you're watching this after the event. Thank you very much. Again, we always try and bring as many shows as we can, depending on our workload and our busy work-life schedules. So I don't know when the next one's going to be. It will be at least next Thursday, hopefully, but possibly Sunday. We'll have the discussions throughout the week. Until then, happy gaming. Hope you enjoy everything that you're doing gaming-wise. I hope those servers stay up. Anyone who hasn't played Trek to Yomi and has a Game Pass subscription, I highly recommend at least giving it one shot. See how you get on with it. And until then, we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.